So welcome everyone. Usually we start this program with a check-in before we start the recording. And it's a really nice way to connect with each other, get to know each other a bit. Today we're going to start with meditation instead. And I want to invite you to just settle and relax. And consider that this is also a way to connect. Through letting our mind settle, be at ease and relaxed. We can then, feel our connection to the Dhamma first and foremost. And by some mysterious means, we also connect with each other when the mind becomes still, or at least settled. Before I became a nun and I was working in high tech, I noticed that even if I was the only person in a meeting who was paying attention to my breathing and very calm, the whole meeting seemed to settle. More calm, more harmonious. And in contexts where, as a group, we would meditate before we meet together, there would be so much more harmony in the conversation, in the work. And living in a large community of monastics and lay people, it was very obvious to see that we would really connect through meditation, not consciously, but having a sensitivity to each other, knowing at some level how each other is. So we don't think of it as the purpose for meditation, but it's one of the many positive results. Becoming calm and relaxed, and bringing our attention to our breath, perhaps, or an object that is pleasant, attractive to the mind, brings happiness, perhaps joy. Ajahn Chah called meditation happiness, a holiday for the heart. That was it. Meditation vacation. Now that we've settled in and given the mind a bit of rest and relaxation, or attention at least, because we're all different. And each experience is somewhat different. So a large part of the practice is to tune in to what is happening now, how it feels. I like the way Ajahn Sumedho refers to it. It's like this. Not trying to distill our experience down into labels or words, but to really notice, be present, directly present and aware of what we're experiencing. I'm going to offer some thoughts on keeping the practice going, and if you want to continue to meditate while I do that, feel free to do that. Someone just asked me a few days ago if I would talk about how to keep the practice going, how to stick with it. Because a lot of people talk about how they might drift away from the practice for a while and then come back and start again, or come to a retreat because they want to have some new energy and enthusiasm for the practice, maybe a bit more discipline. And even in monastic life, where you're in a monastery where you meet together regularly, you practice regularly, there's a schedule, there's a routine. Sometimes the mind or the body or both just aren't ready to sit down to meditate. We all go through these phases. Sometimes you feel very inspired, other times not so much. It's not a consistent, steady state. So what do you do to catch ourselves when we start to, you might say, trip in the practice, so that we can enjoy that stability and support of the practice, regardless of how we feel, regardless of what is happening in life and around us? I think one of the things to look at is, how do we define practice? So most of the time when people talk about their practice, they're talking about sitting meditation, or maybe they include walking meditation. But I think it's also important to include just how we can be present with what we're experiencing in the moment. And, some of that is focusing on what we're doing, perhaps, like that awareness of what we're doing. But if we look at awareness from a deeper perspective, it's that unlabeled presence with whatever we're experiencing, particularly what we're experiencing emotionally, or physically, body, mind. Oftentimes we are taught a certain meditation approach, and we might stick with it for a very long time, but upon reflection, don't see very much quote unquote progress. I've heard this from people from time to time. And I think when that happens, when we feel like, well, we're not really making much progress in our practice, then we need to look at, well, maybe there is a different approach that I can take, and opening up our definition of what practice is important. because our practice involves all 8 aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. And sometimes when our inspiration is waning, it's good to reflect on the things that have changed in our life. Looking for progress in our life is going to be more informative than just looking for the improvements or experiences that come with sitting meditation on the cushion. Because we can practice day after day in terms of sitting meditation and maybe not see that much change, or that, especially if we have these ideas that we're easily can acquire from reading the suttas or listening to people describing what they might experience in meditation. We might think, well, I should be experiencing, seeing light or colors, or hearing a sound, or a sound of silence gives that kind of impression where there should be something happening that maybe isn't happening for us. Even the well-being cascade, that progression from whatever place we start at, our virtue, our faith, or whatever it is, and then that joy, that pamoja arises, that well-being, and then the piti, the tranquility, the sukha, the happiness, and the samadhi, and this where the Buddha said you don't even have to try, it just automatically happens. Well, what if it doesn't automatically happen? And it's important to recognize that, first of all, our minds are conditioned differently, and also the specific instances of where we find ourselves in life, where whatever other conditions are happening around us, or that are impacting us in one way or another, that we may not have the experience in the way that we read it in the books, or we hear from a teacher or someone else talking about what they experience in their practice. And to not let that be a source of discouragement, but instead to get to know ourselves. And we are also changing all the time. What we're talking about, that whole context of our emotional, psychological, physical experience, all of the input that we experience through our senses, it's all constantly changing. So when we see that we don't fit the quote unquote pattern, that our experience isn't fitting the pattern, instead of coming to a conclusion that says, oh, I'm not improving, I'm not gaining anything from this, maybe look more broadly. Am I reacting differently to experiences than I did in the past? Is my ethics improving? Do I have more tools now than I did before for dealing with life's experiences? Do I see more clearly that what I'm hearing, maybe unpleasant words from someone, do I see more clearly that that's just phenomena that I can evaluate, make use of, and let go of? How are these things developing in ourselves, in our way of responding? This can help us recognize that there's a lot more benefit than just the benefits that seem to be highlighted in the ways in which we reflect on or look at or hear about quote unquote practice. Do we see meditation as a holiday for the heart? Or have we been trained in a way that suggests that we should be forcing ourselves to conform to a particular way of meditating? Forcing ourselves can be beneficial to some degree, that encouragement, that discipline, but it can also just cause an inner rebellion. This is how we get to know ourselves, what's really going on inside. And looking at the range of what we can do, both with meditation in terms of using different postures, using different objects, being tuned into what's happening in our system to know whether or not my body is ready or my mind is ready. Are they to sit, to meditate, to walk and meditate, to reflect on Dhamma? And what if it isn't ready? You know, sometimes when we're looking at the 5 hindrances, the hindrances might be arising because the body or the mind just aren't ready at this moment to sit down, to be still. So then how can we support it? If we take this position of observing the mind and caring for it, the way we might for a small child or, you know, like someone else, you know, and give ourselves that kind of loving attention, then it's more likely that we'll start to understand, oh, maybe this time of day for practice isn't really when my body and mind are ready and willing. And what if you get to a place where you're just not ready or willing at all? This is, I think, sometimes what people experience. They might have had a meditation practice go on for some even long period of time and then come to a point where it's just so dry, so uninspiring, so uninviting. Then what we can do is really ask ourselves, like, what would be a pleasant invitation into practice? And what type of practice? Maybe it's painting a picture. Maybe it's walking in nature. Maybe it's something else that the body and mind is open to that brings a sense of calm and a stillness to the mind, support to the mind. Or maybe what's needed is to really be present with our emotional experience. Is there some aversion there? Some boredom that has some aversion behind it? To be present with what we're feeling with kindness and compassion can make all the difference. Just opening up to it, just acknowledging what we really feel, what are those thoughts in the mind? Are those thoughts things like, yeah, I'm not a very good meditator. You hear this a lot. I can't meditate. My mind is always moving. What if that's not really a problem? What if the mind moving can be used to reflect? So this is one of the things I like about Ajahn Sumedho's talks from the last few years, where he talks about how in his early days, he was trying so hard to get samadhi, trying so hard to get jhana, trying so hard to meditate. And he said, then when Ajahn Chah called meditation a holiday for the heart, he's like, it's not a holiday for me. I'm just like pushing myself to try to get something. And then realizing with his many years of practice that if you're trained to get something from meditation, it's really short-circuiting the value of meditation. And he said his mind wasn't a mind that just naturally became quiet. It didn't want to stop internally talking. So he could listen to his mind, listen to what it was saying, even if it was saying totally ridiculous things, but being present and aware of what was happening in his mind was actually the meditation. When he could be present and aware and notice the awareness and the stillness in the awareness and the consistency of the awareness. Not something he was doing, but something he was noticing that's there all the time. I find that incredibly inspiring. And even in the suttas, you see that people have different characters. There are those who become enlightened through their deep meditation, and there are those who become enlightened through wisdom. And the wisdom part always needs to be there for awakening. So we have the samadhi, the immersion part in the Noble Eightfold Path, the mindfulness part, which is essential, which is the awareness. Whether we have a mind that tilts toward stillness or we have a mind that tilts toward activity, we're still mindful of it. And we have the effort, which is really interesting because even in the suttas, effort is described as noticing what's wholesome and unwholesome, encouraging the wholesome mental states to arise and to persist, and calming or discouraging or letting go of the unwholesome mental states that have arisen and knowing what causes them to arise and abandoning that. It doesn't sound very much like I'm going to sit here and grit my teeth and focus on an object no matter what kind of approach, does it? So again, Ajahn Sumedho is discovering over many years that right effort is no effort. Of course, that could be mishandled, misunderstood too. Because like I said, sometimes we need some discipline. Sometimes that encouragement to stick with it is valuable. But that pressure to get something is counterproductive. And the forcing of the mind usually doesn't work very well. So as we kindly and consciously become aware of what happens internally with us, and maybe what works today is not going to be what works tomorrow, and what does it mean to work? Sometimes in the moment, we don't know if it's working or not. But a lot of times afterwards, we can look back and recognize, wow, there's so much forcing myself there that really doesn't lead to peace and stillness. So the Buddha, when he talked to, well, his stepmother, Mahapajapati for one, but other people too, he said, what we're inclining towards, what we're wanting to encourage is peace, stillness. Not necessarily that the mind goes quiet, but that there's an underlying support of peace, of calm, that we can experience in the observer position, regardless of what we're observing, the mind running 100 miles an hour, or the mind being completely quiet. To know that whatever we're experiencing, we can be present with it. And that when we are, there's that underlying background calm, that underlying background relief, stability. That's in that awareness. So what do we do when inspiration is ebbing and maybe our desire to practice is dissolving? Well, one way is to reflect on, well, what's the alternative? Being caught up in the things of the world, does it bring happiness? We can reflect on that. I mean, this is where Ayya Chitananda and I were having a conversation about this. Like, if we didn't want to practice, like, what would we want to do? You know, it's like, what else is there? And so that's a point you come to when you start to see the nature of the world. You know, the constant changing, the instability, the lack of real satisfaction from worldly experience. So then we come back to, how do I be present? How can I connect to or appreciate the Dhamma? Well, we can put our attention on portions of the path that maybe we want to explore more. Certainly all of the parts that are involved in ethics, like right speech, right action, right livelihood, essential there. And then maybe what's more in this moment or this period of time, or maybe any time, that reflection on what is really my right intention, what is the attitude with which I come to experience. And the Buddha was very clear, you know, having a sense of letting go rather than a desire to get or to feel something, experience something. That getting always has a tension in it, a kind of tension that is, well, whether you feel it as pleasant or unpleasant has to do with our conditioning, but ultimately unsatisfying. So that letting go or renunciation has this kind of satisfaction in it, especially as we start to experience more of it. And that non-ill will, non-cruelty. So much of our kind of what blocks us has an underlying aversion behind it, underlying negativity, ill will. And when we recognize that, can we bring kindness and compassion to it, to our own experience of things? And when we do, then we can observe how that changes, how it changes our experience of being present with our own mind, being present with other people, being present with the circumstances that life brings. So this is one place we can look when we feel like our inspiration is waning or our determination to practice is starting to falter. And then to really examine right view and where we may not be in alignment with Dhamma. And of course, until we're fully awakened, there's some wrong view present. Do we know it? Do we understand it? Do we see that? No, if we are afraid of what might happen in life, if we're clinging to things and people and conditions, then at least intellectually we can recognize that there's something that we don't understand yet, because those things are all impermanent. And how do we come to that right view? It's in that kind of reflection. Is this thing that I'm thinking permanent or impermanent? First of all, the thoughts themselves are sankharas. They're impermanent. They're superficial. They don't have a core. Anything we can imagine is just illusion. It's superficial. It doesn't mean that imagining is always wrong. Some of the things we think about and imagine can really help us develop skill. Like if I imagine handling a certain kind of situation in a better way, then I'm more likely to be able to do that. So it can have value, but clinging to it is not going to be ultimately successful or happy because it's unstable. It's just an idea. Even things we have faith in, if we don't have direct experience of it, it's just an idea. Sometimes having faith in something because we trust a teacher, or we trust the Buddha, or we trust the description of the Dhamma can be really helpful until we have direct experience of that particular reality. But we can also recognize that we can pick up ideas and have faith in things that are completely erroneous. And to know that, to not, have 100% trust in what we might, in ideas that we might adopt. Be willing to see that they're not actually in alignment with reality. Be willing to be open. So sometimes when we feel like the bottom has dropped out of everything, I've had this a few times in my life, then what I've found is that the best way to handle that crater that I feel like I'm standing on the edge of is to create into it. Ayya says that sounds too fluffy. So forgive me. But to really consider, like, what can I do now in this blank space that has opened up like a gaping hole, that I feel like it could be swallowed up by, and instead, okay, what is it that I can do with my practice? The big definition of practice. Reflecting on intention, reflecting on what is right view, reflecting on, listening to the thoughts that are coming through the mind and being present with that with kindness and compassion. Reaching out to friends, reaching out to teachers, even if it's like looking somebody up on the internet and listening to the Dhamma. There's a lot of support in friendship, in doing things with others who have good intentions, to surround ourselves with people who are wise and generous, kind. And if we feel like they're hard to find, then look in a different direction. So those are some thoughts. When we feel like we don't want to practice, find a new practice or find a way to help the body and help the mind be ready to practice. Look more carefully at the good results that we've experienced and create. I remember a talk that was given by a monk at Amaravati. His name is Ajahn Kongret. And he said that his, I think the way he put it is his barami was running out, or his merit was running out, and his Thai, and sometimes the Thais will talk about, like if you start to kind of lose your enthusiasm for the holy life, then it's kind of like you just don't have enough merit to stay in robes. But he decided that he was just going to make more merit. That was going to be his response. And he's still in robes. He's teaching sometimes with Ajahn, and I just found that so inspiring. Instead of like, yeah, I'm just losing it and just let it go with that. Now turn around and create something. Create an opportunity for yourself to enjoy the practice in the big sense. So he threw himself more into service, into things that he could do to help others. And that really helped bring more inspiration for him, for his life in the monastic robes, in the monastic life. But in lay life, it's the same thing. You know, usually when there's some kind of down pulling energy, reaching out to help people who are in need is such an important way to relieve ourselves of that down pulling sense. And maybe what it also helps us to see is that when we're seeing ourselves losing our own steam or vitality, it's really a very much sense of self kind of experience. Do we recognize that I'm really looking at my conditions very much from this idea of self? Can I open up beyond that to recognize that I can view this all from a place of Dhamma rather than the sense of self? That I should notice those ways in which I try to blame other people or blame the conditions around me rather than observing and being directly present with my experience. Blaming has a going out kind of movement. We're looking outside. And it's not to say that there aren't inhibiting conditions out there sometimes. That's true. And sometimes we need to change, turn away from those conditions to find something more supportive. But in general, when we're feeling lousy and we look outside for the cause, we're not giving that part in ourselves the attention it needs to understand why we're experiencing it this way. Would another person under different circumstances, but having those same inputs, react differently? That's been always helpful for me to notice. It's like if somebody else in this situation would have a very different response, then let me look at why I'm having this response of feeling pulled down by this experience, because that I can change. The beautiful thing about the Dhamma and the beautiful thing then about reality is that it really rests with us. We have the power to change things. It's amazing to be living in a human form because we have this conscious awareness and we can reflect upon it. We can really observe it for ourselves. This is an incredible opportunity. This is how we can awaken, because we have this ability. It comes along with being a human being. We have this ability to connect to the Dhamma, have this spiritual experience. You can even feel a field of goodness being generated by our practice. This is an incredible opportunity. This is the reason to live, really. This is the reason to keep our life going as long as we can, to practice in this way, to see how we can directly know Dhamma, how we can be connected with each other without even being in the same room, without even talking to each other. How many times have you thought of someone that you haven't seen in a long time or heard from in a long time, and then the next day or two, you hear from them or you run into them somewhere? There's all kinds of ways that we connect, like I was saying earlier. This is part of the human experience. Oftentimes we're so focused on just the world, all the incredible onslaught of, sense input, and we forget that there's something much deeper happening where we are connected. and so much more available to us. And it comes through this Noble Eightfold Path, every part of it, that we can more directly experience the true nature of things. I think I'll stop there, and I'd be delighted to hear any questions or comments you might have. Yes, Mahesh.
Thank you for the talk. One question I have is like, what I feel is like meditation as a technique should help you transform. Otherwise, if I'm like, if that is not transforming, right, it's not helping. Of course, being good and like going against your defilements, all of this will help because you're not making bad karma and all of that stuff. But that's more of a belief. It's more like a belief, and then you're forcing yourself against your nature all the time. Let's say I want to binge watch on YouTube versus now like read a Dhamma book or do something, go volunteer somewhere. It's like I have to go against my defilements and then prioritize practice. And if I have to continue to do that, and even after like say, several years, binge watching is still fun, and then I still have to go against my nature to do this, it becomes like a constant, like nothing is changing, that it's not transforming, the technique is not transforming me. I'm constantly going against my defilements with willpower to do this other thing because I fear karma, or because I fear, maybe it is based on a belief that this is not a good thing to do, so let me avoid this, right? So that it's like a constant struggle, and it becomes more of a belief system rather than some kind of technique that is transforming you, just like any other. It's becoming more like any other religion or a belief system, right? I think, can you talk about that?
So one thing I want to ask you is, I mean, I can really appreciate what you're saying. Like, okay, I'm going against my habits or my conditioning, but and that it's a belief that somehow this will be better. Have you found any evidence, direct experience that it's better?
I mean, if I engage in my essential things like binge watching, for example, right, it is more fun. But then if I do it all day, it's not like it's not that very helpful. But so you can mix it with maybe going for a walk and then come back to binge watching or do some work and come back to it. Like still, you can make it fun like that, right? Overall, you can balance it. But why take this entire thing out and just like go against your thing? And let's say follow.
So it feels like it hasn't gotten to the point where binge watching is just like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
Because this other, like meditating or walking in nature or whatever, that might be more uplifting to the mind rather than agitating. You're not experiencing that feels better.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not the joy out of practice, like let's say if you get into deep concentration or if you get into jhanas, the practice itself is there's joy within the practice, and you can move towards that compared to worldly sensual joy, right? So when that doesn't happen, practice is still practice. You're doing it. It's good sometimes, but then it's not like a very good joy that comes out of it.
Right. So the other part of what I hear is maybe the technique isn't when you said like a technique should cause us to change. That's an interesting
like technique.
I understand.
The couple of ways, right? Either use the joy so that you can let go of sensual pleasures,
right?
Or along with concentration, wisdom, it's helping you uproot those defilements so that you transform.
Right.
Yeah, otherwise
And it
it's
feels like, and that sounds like a really good description,
Mhm.
those two things you said. And it doesn't feel like that's happening with the techniques you've been using.
Mhm.
So it might be needed to find a technique, a different technique. But to even, I want to question even the concept that the technique changes us. It's like, I think there's a combination of things that we need. And I, I wish I had enough kind of psychic power or wisdom to be able to say, well, this is the right one for you. You should try this. But I don't have that. It's more like, I think the need for more investigation into like, what is it that lifts up the heart in a way that those things that you were describing happen, that there's enough joy that doesn't come from external conditions, but comes from within. So how does it work for you to touch the Dhamma? How does it work for you to see the impermanent nature and instability of the phenomena and touch into the Dhamma that is more stable and trustworthy? And so, I mean, that's really the question, I think. So what is that going to take? And there are a lot of different approaches, of course. So, and noticing whether even the techniques you've used, if it's coming from a place of, I'm just going to be disciplined, which is, I mean, your discipline is very admirable. It's wonderful to see that, we have the strength and the determination to stick with something. But then asking, is that really letting my heart open in a way that I can really be present with what's deep inside? And then, like maybe there's another aspect, not that you have to give up the, if you found, I don't know, mindfulness of breathing is helpful or whatever the technique is, if there's something that helps bring some calm. But then another piece might be, doing some somatic experiencing or doing some more looking at the depths of how does this, how does, do I have I learned how to be directly present with experience at this point? Because those parts, like, it may not be that a meditation technique necessarily helps us to develop wisdom. Like I even heard Ajahn Sumedho on a recent talk say that and I don't think that he means across the board, but he said people doing anapanasati, they can be very calm, but they don't have wisdom. So it's not like we can really trust a meditation technique to cause this development alone. It's only one piece. So you've been adding other pieces. But like you said, even developing virtue, if we only have a belief that it's going to be better, or a fear of what happens if we don't, and we aren't yet able to see directly the positive results, and I think that's a place to look. How can I notice the positive results of my development of truthfulness, or my development of generosity, or my development of kindness, or whatever? So it's like it would be nice if one kind of activity could bring this one kind of result. It seems to be more intertwined than that, the path itself. And I think it's very important to look at what the gains directly are. And even reminding our mind can go back to those old habits and find a kind of comfort in it, whether it's binge watching or whatever. But at some point, we recognize that actually brings us down, even though it might temporarily relieve us from stress or whatever, but actually ultimately it's downpulling. It's not awakening. It's not bringing that kind of real joy. we have to notice it ourselves. I don't know, is any of this helping? But I want to talk more about this because I think it's very important. And I do think that there are more approaches that we can take, usually than we realize. But I so much appreciate your question and your formulation of it. It really, like, that this is the terrain we're working with. And this is where, as human beings with the capacity of the human mind, we have the ability to unpack this and to experience more deeply. Serena?
There's a lot in what you've been saying today for me about the grieving. And 3 words really stood out: kindness, compassion, and create. When you said kindness and compassion, I realized I need to soften, if I can, in Dhamma, the attitude toward the grieving.
Yeah.
And then create this chasm, because I do need to find who this person is now without my partner of all these years. And that's huge, just huge. So
Yeah.
Thank you. It gave me a lot to take in and into. I have to find the joy within in Dhamma.
Yeah.
Somehow find that, because right now there's no joy.
Yeah, and maybe even some, like little flashes of excitement to find out who Serena is without Ron, and what your life can be now, and what it can hold, and what it can create, what can develop.
Yeah.
And human beings go through these experiences. Somehow we survive it.
Yeah.
And it's so important to realize, like I said, as long as we're drawing breath, as long as we're conscious, we have an opportunity to not just create, not just enjoy, not just to be kind and in service and so on, but to actually wake up, to really see the truth. And you've come a long way. You know that. You've told me about it. You've come a long, we all have. We wouldn't be sitting here right now if we haven't come a long way, to the Dhamma, and to recognize that this is truly an opportunity, no matter how old we are, like no matter what has happened to us before, we have this opportunity now still to live and be aware and bring that kindness and compassion in, and be present with what experience is, in this moment. And the more we tune into that, the more opportunity we open up to really see the Dhamma. And this is true of everybody. This is true. It's available to all of us, and it's not far away. That's another view that we think, oh, it's the Dhamma or the realization of Nibbana is far away, but it's not. It's a shift.
Okay.
We turn our awareness to see the reality of this world, and through that, see the reality of the Dhamma.
Thank you for the reminder not to look to the self, but to look to the Dhamma. I have to remind myself I can't do this through any sense of self. It has to come through Dhamma. And it's just difficult, and I don't always know where I'm at, but right now it's not very stable. But like you say, you just got to keep in looking to the Dhamma.
Yeah, keep coming back to that and realizing that it's like that for everyone, especially when we're grieving or we're feeling really discouraged or we're feeling really sad, it's like to remember that all of that, feeling angry, having aversion, all of that comes from the sense of self.
Yeah.
All of that comes from approaching life from the sense of self. And if I can just see that, if we can just be aware of that, that's enough.
Okay.
Because the awareness itself is rooted in the Dhamma. So
Okay.
it's like that's all we need to do. It's not like we have to somehow completely change into something we don't even know what it is. How can we even imagine nibbana? That's not the point. The point is being with that ability to be aware, to be present with, and recognize that there's relief in that.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ayya, so much.
Beautiful. Neil?
Yeah. It interested me when you were talking and you included creating, um, and I don't remember if you connected it while you were talking with this idea of a chasm, but as Serena was talking, it occurred to me that, at least for me, when I hear the word chasm, I think of black,
Mhm.
dark.
Mhm.
But then I connected in my mind with my favorite musical, of course, and the great last line from it. And it has to do with an artist who's struggling with a block, but he says, white, a blank page or canvas, my favorite, so many possibilities. And I realized that if we can look at this chasm as white rather than black,
Yeah.
then we can begin to come back out of something. And this has got me thinking about my sister who's going through a really, really, really serious period of depression. And I realize as soon as we're finished here, I have to call her on the phone and remind her that that was also her favorite musical and that she needs to, that it might help her to look at what she's going through as possibility rather than depression. So I thank you and Serena for helping me make this connection right now.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, Neil. That's really true and beautiful. And it's like this is what we can do by being present in that awareness. So it reminds me, I've shared before, I remember Ajahn Sumedho talking about one of the nuns coming to him many years ago and saying everything's dark. And he said, is that which observes the dark dark? And so from that observer position, make it white, make it bright, go towards the light, as they say. And the light shining on the experience is really wisdom. Seeing it more for what it is. It's a temporary passing of something. And when we come to it from the sense of self, it keeps recreating the dark. We're thinking about the things that are pulling us down, the things that, like the sadness, and we keep recreating it. But if we step back and we observe it and we're witnessing it and we're like, well, it's like this. It's like this to feel this grief, to see this chasm in front of me. It's like this. I think I talked about it as a crater. It's like you're just standing at the edge of this crater or chasm. It is black. But then from that position of Dhamma or witnessing, being present with, bring in the light, move towards the light. That's what our wholesome actions do too. Our virtue, it moves towards the light, not the dark. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Holly?
I just appreciate your continued exposition of the many ways we can practice.
Mhm.
And especially when, like, there's some life situations that pull me away from quiet sitting sometimes.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's struggle, sometimes it's a vacation in the van, or
Yeah.
a lot of simultaneous swell outdoor activities with friends. And so I've been allowing myself more to be okay with what I call alternate forms of growing still inside. I don't really call it meditation, but it's like gardening. I go out in the morning in our new little home with our little yard, and I see what's happening, and I pick up a few things and adjust a few things, and I don't think much.
Mhm.
Gene noticed on the trip, he said, "You were really peaceful when you're preparing a meal."
Mm.
It's true. When I'm preparing a meal, I'm just so absorbed in the food before me and the timing and the different ways it's handled, and
Mhm.
um, how it's going to look and how it's going to taste, and does it have the nutrition? Is it the right quantity? So I look forward to continued words of support for all of us in ways to practice in addition to meditation and wise reflection.
Yeah. Well, this is, Ajahn Ganha is like, have sati, samadhi, and panya all the time. He said, for monastics, 2 hours of sitting meditation a day, formal practice is enough. You don't need 4 or 5 or 6 a day or 12 a day or something, it's, and we can notice, like, if what is the mind like? Some of my most beautiful meditations have been during caregiving, like just being there, or it's not even like caring, it could be caring for someone who's got a physical, disability or something that's happening like that, like caring for my mom when she was dying. But it can also be just being present to help out, someplace where your only intention is to be helpful. Like, how can I be helpful now? What's my next task? What can I do? And have the calmness of mind that is just permeates the entire body in this task, like you're describing cooking or gardening. And to realize that that too is meditation. That is the mindfulness, the stillness and collectedness of mind. And panya, do we see things as they are while we're engaged in this? Not taking things personally, not being caught up in, what someone said to me or how I feel or whatever, not that there's anything wrong with being present with all of that. That's good. But, there are times when we can just be in whatever we're doing. And then if we're not doing enough formal meditation, we can notice that. Maybe there's more stress, apparent, agitation or whatever, or don't feel as calm, don't feel as connected. Then maybe we need more formal practice. But we get to know ourselves. And there is a felt sense where you can really see, what is helpful. Is it helpful to do more formal practice, or is it helpful to do more engaged practice? You might call it something like that. Is it helpful to do something creative? And just really getting to know ourselves. Is music or chanting inspiring, uplifting, or is it distracting? We can get to know ourselves. What lifts up the heart. And then you can even see the difference between lifting the heart in a spiritual way or lifting it in a worldly way. So just get to know yourself and be willing to shift according to changing conditions so that you're really giving yourself some real support in developing the heart, real support in being able to relax around all this conditioning and maybe trauma or whatever else we've experienced in life. If we can observe it and be present with it and be aware that we are in this present moment, not in that moment in the past, and we can see it now clearly from the position, from the reality of Dhamma. This is possible. And we can help each other remember. It's so beautiful to have spiritual friends. Any one last question or comment?
I did just have a thought that, and this is just me being silly about language maybe, but the word bhavana is often used to mean meditation, but it also means becoming or creating, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Development, yeah.
yeah, so I just thought that was interesting given some of the things we've been saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't going to tell this story, but I will because then you'll know how I came to this understanding. One of the times in my life when it felt like this huge gaping chasm opened in front of me was when shortly after starting Karuna Buddhist Vihara, and my son was a monk and he was living at Berkeley Buddhist Monastery and he was helping get started. We were I was settled in Millbrae, living in a house, a rented house, and I had a lot of women guests coming and going and some nuns coming and going. And my son was helping. I mean, I had just become I started it, I was still a seminary, and then I had my bhikkhuni ordination. And a couple of months after, at my bhikkhuni ordination, my son started contemplating leaving the robes. And he had been helping with the programs because, I'm just getting started. And he had over more than 10 years, like 12 years or something as a monk. And so he was kind of the official stabilized, senior monastic on site, visiting and helping with the programs. We had a regular, evening program during the week, but we also had a regular Sunday morning program, and he would always come over for the Sunday morning program and help teach. And then he was, starting to move away from his holy life, wanted to return to lay life. And even though he was still in robes, he decided not to come on Sunday morning. And that Sunday morning, maybe in January or something like that, he didn't come and no one else showed up. And I just felt so desolate. It felt so like this huge crater or chasm. And that's when I thought, I know what to do with this. You have this blank space. Create into it. And so I was looking for inspiration, and I don't know, later that day, maybe the next day, whatever, I went over to the, can't remember the name of it now. It's a Catholic, was a Catholic convent years ago in Burlingame, Mercy Center. And I remember maybe earlier, I had been reading about the history of their order and how the service the different nuns gave. And I found that really inspiring. And I thought, okay, I can make Karuna Buddhist Vihara whatever I want it to be. if I'm here by myself, making it into something. And that inspiration of how those women had served and created really carried me. Because we have a choice when we stand at the edge of that chasm. And I'm not going down. And it worked. And you're never really alone. It can feel pretty alone. But there are people and resources to reach out to. So just remember that. Well, thank you, everyone.